The story that we are going to be reading today is titled Leonardo's Horse by Jean Fritz, illustrated by Hudson Talbot. The story begins on page 360. The genre of the story is a biography. A biography is a short story of a person's life written by another person. As you read, notice all the major events in Leonardo da Vinci's life. Anyone who watched the young Leonardo wander the countryside around his home in Vinci might have guessed that he would be an artist. He stopped to examine everything. He looked at the landscape as if he were memorizing it. So it was no surprise when his father took him as a younger teenager to Florence to study art. The main idea is that Leonardo, even as a young man, had the markings of a great artist. Two details on this page that support this main idea are he stopped to examine everything and he looked at the landscape as if he were memorizing it. The author began the text by showing what Leonardo was like when he was young. This was an effective way to begin the story because it explained to the reader what Leonardo was like as a child and that he was inspired by other artists to become an artist when he grew up. People noticed that Leonardo was different. He dressed differently. While other young men wore long togas, Leonardo wore short, rose-colored velvet togas. He wrote differently, backwards, from the right side of the paper to the left. A person would have to use a mirror to read his writing, and he wouldn't eat meat. He liked animals too much to eat anything that had once been alive. Nor could he stand the sight of caged birds. If he saw a man selling birds, he would buy them all. He would then open the cages and watch the birds fly away. What a flurry they made! How did they do it? All his life, Leonardo tried to discover their secret of flying so he could make a flying machine for himself. For a man who liked to ask questions, Leonardo da Vinci was born at the right time, April 15th, 1452. Everybody was asking questions then. The age was called the Renaissance, a type of rebirth when people who had forgotten how to be curious became curious again. They were exploring new countries, discovering, inventing, looking at old things in new ways. What was the point, Leonardo asked, in copying what they had already done? He had to bring his own experience into whatever he painted. You wouldn't catch him putting a halo around the head of a saint. How could he? He had never seen a halo. Leonardo da Vinci turned out to be a famous artist. He still was not just an artist. He could never be just one thing. He was an engineer, an architect, a musician, a philosopher, an astronomer. Once he fashioned a special kind of flute made of silver in the shape of a horse's head. The ruler of Florence, Lorenzo de' Medici, asked him to deliver it as a gift to the Duke of Milan. This was lucky for Leonardo. He had heard that the Duke of Milan wanted to honor his father with a bronze horse in front of his palace, and Leonardo wanted to be the one to make it. Please pause this video and create the same chart that you see here in your reading notebook. We are learning about Greek roots and suffixes today. In your chart, you have a column for the root or suffix, a column for a word that uses that root or suffix, and a column for the meaning that you are going to create. We are going to do this one together. So the Greek root or suffix that we're looking at is bio. And we need to come up with a word that has bio in it. So a word that has bio in it is biology. What does biology mean? It's a science word that means life. I would like you to complete this, 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 and this right now in your notebook. Please pause this video. This would be his mark on history. Hundreds of years later, people would point to the horse. Leonardo made that, they would say. So he wrote to the Duke, listing all the things that he could do. He could make cannons, lightweight bridges, and covered chariots that couldn't be broken or harmed. On and on he went, but he saved the most important point for the last. He could make a bronze horse. In the end, he didn't send the letter. He simply left for Milan. Never mind that he was in the midst of painting a large religious picture for Florence. Let someone else finish it. He had planned the picture, and that was the important part. The main idea of this paragraph is that Leonardo da Vinci thought that he would write a letter bragging about everything that he does. But instead, he decided to leave a big religious painting that he was working on for someone else to finish because what he really cared about was planning for the picture. I know that's the main idea because he said in the story, let someone else finish it, talking about the painting, and that he had planned a picture, and that was the important part. Leonardo was 30 years old now, handsome with curly blonde hair. The Duke gave him the job of working on the horse, but at the same time he was expected to take charge of entertainment in the palace. He had a beautiful singing voice. He could play musical instruments. He could juggle and ask riddles. And he was also asked to stage elaborate plays for special occasions wherever he had had a chance when he went back to the horse. He visited the stables, studying how a horse was put together. He needed to understand everything about his subject. He measured and drew pictures until he knew where all the bones and muscles of a horse were. But you couldn't show all the muscles on a statue, he said, or the horse would look like a bag of turnips. You should show only those muscles the horse was using or getting ready to use. He visited statues of horses. Many were shown in an amble leg, front leg moving at the same time as the left back leg. This was not easy for a horse. He had to be taught to do it. Leonardo saw one horse, however, that he described as free, left front leg and right back leg moving together, not a trot. Moreover, both ears were pointed forward. Some horses pointed one ear back to hear the rider's orders. Leonardo was ready to begin, but the Duke wasn't quite ready. He wanted a much bigger horse than the one he had originally planned, one 3 times larger than life. Leonardo could manage anything. Could Leonardo manage anything that large? The Duke wondered. He wrote to Lorenzo, asking him to recommend someone who could get the job done. Lorenzo replied, Leonardo da Vinci was the only one. On April 23, 1490, Leonardo wrote in his notebook, I resumed work on the horse. The hardest part would be the casting. He collected 58,000 pounds of metal, tin and copper, which could be heated until it was fluid. This would be turned into bronze and used to cast the horse. But should he pour the bronze all at once? No, sorry. No one had tried a single pouring of anything this large. The main idea of these 2 pages is that Leonardo got the job of making the horse, and the Duke also put him in charge of entertainment at the palace. In November 1493, he had completed the clay model, 24 feet high. It was shown off at one of the Duke's special occasions, and it was a sensation. Visualizing is when readers create pictures in their minds as they read. Visualizing allows us to enjoy what we read as well as monitor and adjust our comprehension as necessary. Some details from this page that give us a visual or a picture in our mind are these 2 phrases, 24 feet high model, because that makes us think of how big this thing was, and the word sensation, which tells us that it was really awesome. But Leonardo seemed in no hurry to start casting. Perhaps he wasn't sure how he'd do it. Besides, he was planning a new project. Later, in 1498, there were rumors that the French were preparing to invade Milan, and the Duke wanted to be ready. And there was all the metal that Leonardo had collected, just what the Duke needed. So he sent it off to be made into a cannon. Well, this is war, Leonardo reasoned. What else could they do? When the French came in 1499, Leonardo and the Duke fled, but the horse couldn't leave. There he was when the French arrived. The archers laughed. Never would they find as perfect a target, they said. Pulling back the strings in their bows, they let the arrows fly. Ping, ping, ping. The horse sagged. Ping. Then it rained, and the horse became smaller and smaller. At least it was nothing but a pile of mud stuck with arrows. In the second paragraph, we learn that Duke sent Leonardo's medal to be made into a cannon. This is an important event because it tells us that the Duke took all the metal that Leonardo used and turned it into a different material. Leonardo went back to inventing and painting, but he never forgot his horse. He still wanted to invent a flying machine, but he still couldn't do it. His greatest disappointment, however, was his horse. As Leonardo became older, his hair turned white and grew down to his shoulders. His beard reached his waist and he became depressed. What had he achieved? He asked himself. He complained to his notebook. Tell me, he asked, if anyone has been achieved by me. Tell me, tell me. He was especially hard when his rival, Michelangelo, taunted him. You, Michelangelo said, who made a model of a horse you could never cast in bronze and which you gave up your shame. In this notebook, Leonardo mourned, I have wasted my hours. On May 2nd, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci died. It was said that even on his deathbed, Leonardo wept for his horse. In the last paragraph on page 374, an information that is factual was this date. On May 2nd, 1519, Leonardo da Vinci died. We know that's a fact because it has a date and it could be proved by looking it up either on the internet or in a book. Something that is not a fact is that it was said that even on his deathbed, Leonardo wept, or means cried. There's no way that we can prove that. In 1977, Charles Dent, an American and big fan of Leonardo, saw a magazine article about him. When he read that Leonardo died grieving for his horse, Charles said, let's give Leonardo his horse. But Charles Dent died before work was finished. Later, a sculptor from New York City, Nina Archmu, carried on with Charles' dream. Many people contributed money to help her finish. Finally, on September 10, 1999, in Milan, Italy, in the front of huge crowds, the horse was unveiled. At last, Leonardo's horse was home. Now please copy down this question and respond to it in your notebook. Was Leonardo da Vinci successful as